Hello, everyone. This is Raise Your Voice as part of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Brett Rutherford, joined as always by my good friend and co host, Darby Robinson. We are live on youtube.com/at Raise Your Voice and also on the D Raise Bay X account. We are also available wherever you get your podcasts. If you can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that's a great way to help spread what we do to more and more Rays fans. And if you really want to say thank you, you can head on over to patreon.com/raise your voice, where you can become a member for as little as $1 a month. Darby, June 17th, the Rays have played, oh my gosh, how many games now? It feels like a million games.
Too many. They played too many.
72.
We would like to have played less.
We're not even halfway done. The Rays are currently
it feels
at
like they
34 and
played
38.
triple that. It really
Yes,
feels like this has felt like we should be already done with the second season at this point, right? Like we're not at the All-Star break yet. Is this September?
No.
What?
Not even close. We've got a long way to go.
What? Oh my God.
Like we're not going to make this episode too doom and gloom, right? There are some positives. There are some fun things to talk about. But overall, I think the tone of this episode will be, this is who the 2024 Rays are, right? It's no longer too early. We're well past Memorial Day. We're heading into, the All-Star break in less than a month. This is who the team is. They're on the position player side. This is the roster. Well, I won't say they plan to have, because I don't know if they plan to have Ben Rortvedt or even Ahmed Rosario. But this is the fully healthy Rays, other than the pitchers that are still working their way back. And while there are some positives, and we are going to discuss those, it won't be all doom and gloom. I think we just kind of need to come to terms with, because this is a team that you and I were very bullish on going into the year. We didn't think they were going to win 100 games, but we had an episode with Jim Turbion. We all loved over 84.5 wins. That was the Vegas win total. That's, I guess, still within reach, but going to be pretty tough at this point to overcome that. But yeah, where are you at now on June 17th as we record this live with the Rays?
I think I'm still baffled by how bad they are. And in the last pod, I was pretty much like, I was kind of the ability of like this stretch. We kind of talked about like the time we record next, which is now, like that would tell you a lot about the team. And I did not, going into that, I did not expect a lot. I did not expect to get a win. I thought easy sweep from Baltimore. I did not see a lot of wins on the horizon because just the way the team was playing was really bad. But it's still baffling to me why this team is so bad. Like them losing a lot doesn't with the way they're playing or the results they've been getting, having more losses upcoming doesn't makes a lot of sense. Because if I was just like, show me some just random data, don't tell me who the players are, don't tell me who the team is, but just show me like this is a team that has like a bottom tier offense, like what one of the worst offenses in baseball in every metric you can possibly imagine, like really low power, really low average, really low on base percentage, like all that sort of stuff, bad runs, all that. And then show me like a negative right now 71 run differential. And I would be like, oh yeah, that's just like a bad team. Like if you told me to guess the wins, I'd say like low 20s at this point. I would say it's probably like Anaheim or Colorado or Oakland, like maybe they've like played a little bit better. So that's why it's less than negative 100 run differential, but like a bad team. Like, oh, it should not be so. Like against the Baltimore Orioles, like how many wins does that team get? Just that framework, I'd be like, oh, 0, not even close. Like against the Braves, even the bad Braves, like not even close. So that part doesn't surprise me. It's the fact that this isn't like the injured Rays. This isn't like the bad Rays. It's like the core, like you said, this is the core that I thought was going to be a high 80s, low total core. And like there's question marks about the pitching. but the pitching hasn't been. I mean, that pitching's also been weird and bad, but like not awful. Like definitely fine enough. But the offense has been so bad. And I had an article this week on D-Rays Bay titled "The Worst Offense in Rays/Devil Rays History." I didn't have a better title. I just was like, this is just what it is. And it is the worst offense in production wise that this franchise has ever produced, which is insane. That's insane. You would never be able to, if you told me that right now, that on this pod, on the June 17th pod, this would be the worst offense that the franchise that had 10 years of maybe some of the worst baseball ever produced, like an art film, like they just like it was an active like art installation of like how bad of baseball can you create, that this would be the worst. I would have said that like Brandon Lau, Randy Rosarena, Yandy Diaz, Josh Lowe, and Isaac Paredes all fell into like a mystery void and just disappeared from the earth. But they're here. Like some of them were injured, but like they're all there. Every one of them played this week. And they trailed in 10 straight games. They won 3 of those somehow, but they were still 3-7, and they trailed in every single one of them. And we're probably the worst team in every single one of them. And that's with that core of 5. So I would not have believed you that this was the worst. And we'll dive into the numbers a little bit because it is pretty fascinating. But that's the part to me that, like, I don't know about you, but like that's the part that's causing like a mental breakdown for me. Is like this shouldn't be this bad. Like I can accept an awful season. Shit happens in baseball, but like this isn't the recipe for that bad.
Right.
Like that's the part that's weird.
Yeah, no, and you could talk about like from the 30,000 foot view of this team lost Wander Franco, they lost Tyler Glasnow, they lost Shane McClanahan, still reeling off of like Jeffrey Springs and Drew Rasmussen, who will be back eventually. But I don't like, as good as Tyler Glasnow has been, and as good as we can assume Wander Franco would have been on the field, I don't think that's saving this team. Sure. Are they going to have a few more wins? Yeah, definitely. I mean, Tyler Glasnow has been one of the best pitchers in baseball, but this record doesn't flip. I mean, I don't know if we're talking about a team that's still anywhere close to how well the Yankees have been playing. I don't think it's been that close. I think they pulled off enough wins to hang around 500 to where I think we've kind of said, well, they're one like 8-game winning streak away from being right back in this thing. And in some ways they still are, but it doesn't seem like it's on the horizon. The pitching and this is never a race you want to win, but your pitching staff was the first to 100 home runs allowed this season, leading all of baseball. And we've talked a lot about how this year's staff, for the most part, you still got like really electric pitchers like Pete Fairbanks and Taj Bradley. But this year's pitching staff is, for the first time in a long time, feels like it relies more on its command than its stuff. You've got guys like Zach Eflin and Zach Littell, and Aaron Savali's got some good stuff. Don't get me wrong, but always has been able to command his pitches really well, and that's what made him successful, because his best pitch by far is his curveball. Anyways, bigger point is the Rays have had this mentality of, Kyle Snyder says it all the time, like, and you'll hear pitchers say that you've got great stuff, like just throw it right down the middle, and like that's been the Rays' philosophy. It's like, what happens when they don't have great stuff and they just throw a ton of strikes and they get destroyed? And it feels like that's what's happened. They're giving up like some of the most hard contact in the league, the most fly balls, and when that happens, obviously it leads to more home runs allowed. And while I'm still excited to see how like Bradley and Pepio keep pushing forward, maybe we were a little naive to think a rotation led by Eflin, Littell, and Savale was going to be the ones that get it done. But I don't know. It's clearly not working. And the bullpen is just uncharacteristically unreliable for the Rays. For the longest time, it's always been the strongest part of that team. And while like Pete Fairbanks and Jason Adam have been fine, and we've had some really weird outings out of Garrett Clevenger, and Phil Maton is turning into
Yeah, he's
one of
been
the worst free agent signings. He's just been bad. He's been one of the worst pitchers that has kept a job in Major League Baseball. And it's mind-boggling to me because, like you said, we were pretty excited about the Maton signing. He's 31 years old, so it's not like he's like he had enough success to where you think, okay, this guy can hang around. This guy will be good. And we haven't seen that, and it's really discouraging.
it's been bizarre. I mean, I think the pitching, the starting pitching, you know, like okay, they weren't going to be able to. The problem is these games, like when you're looking at this run differential of like -71, one of pitching or offense has to basically be cratered to be able to be at that level. Because and you look at it, all of the teams. So like at -71, the Rays are in like the list with like Oakland and the Angels, and both of those teams have 28 wins and 26 wins. The only teams above 40, -40, are like the Rays, the Angels, the Athletics, the Rockies, the Marlins, and the White Sox, and all of them have in the 20s or low 20s, or in the White Sox case, 19 wins. Except for the Rays, who have 34 wins. So at 34, at those mid 30s, they're in the range with like the Mets, the Giants, the Pirates, the Jays, the Cardinals, all of which are in the -20, -30, right? Like not good. They've been losing. Like they have more losses than wins. They're going to have a negative run differential, basically. Like it's hard to do it the other way, to basically always blow out and then lose close. So, but like, that's weird. So it's like the pitching hasn't been awful, but like it's just when it's bad, it's just like it's just the worst. Like when they're not on, it's just completely awful. But the offense has also just been so bad. So I look at the starting pitching and I see the home runs are insane, right? Because like even in a lot of these games, like it's not even like the worst starts ever. Like Eflin, the last few starts, I feel like he's given up under 4 runs like each start, but it like he's always given up runs after he gets a run, which always feels worse when the Rays never score. So it's like you don't want to give those back. But guys like Littell, like he had one blow up start, like only one really. Savali's been pretty bad, but the peripherals are good. Eflin's been a little shaky. They're all guys that you're like 3, 4, 5s, right? And then have had to play a bigger role. But I still look at that and I'm like, a halfway okay offense, and that rotation is fine with also a really good bullpen. So for me, the rotation still is not the problem. It's still annoying how badly they pitched, but like that's its own thing. That's individually, like certain pitchers have just been very disappointing. Like Eflin, I thought he was like emerging into a number 2, but he's just a 3-4, like he's always been in his career. And Savali's a 4-5. Littell is like a nice 4-5. Like that's still fine. But like for me, the bullpen and the offense is the two parts. And the offense I wasn't expecting to be like the best ever. Like last year with Wander Franco, this was the best offense in baseball for the first half. You take Wander Franco out, that is a big loss. But like you should still expect some offense, right? You should still expect even with some injuries, like that this offense can do some stuff. And they've been so pitiful. Again, like the worst offense in Devil Rays history, which is just insane. The bullpen, though, is way more to blame for, in my opinion, than the rotation because of the fact that the rotation sort of banked in. You kind of have to deal with that. Like the bullpen, how is this still a problem for this team? Like this is a team that can really churn through some guys, and every one of their moves in the offseason didn't work, but like the worst pitcher that ever pitched in baseball, each one. Like it was like Davinsky, Maton, Waguespack, Alexander, like really, really rough stuff.
Yeah.
And
for the first time, I've kind of questioned like their process and how they got to those guys.
The entire team this year, that's where I think I'm getting at with like why it's so confusing is what you just said, is it feels like the process is just broken entirely, both pitching and hitting. But like the pitching wise, it does feel like I went with I liked Matan. I'm not gonna sit here and say I didn't. I thought that was a great signing. It was a little confusing they went and signed him, but he was fantastic with Houston. He was fantastic with Cleveland. He's the worst version he's ever pitched in his entire career here. So whatever the Rays are doing, it seems like it's like the opposite of every like Rays meme. Like every pitcher, it's like this is the worst version they've ever done in their career was this year right now with the Rays. But like you were saying like some of those guys were questionable, right? You're like Waguespaw coming in. Chris Davinsky was one. You're like, interesting that he's the one of the guys last year that you brought in.
And they kept him early. Like they locked him up early.
Like, Alexander
Earl, what else is out there?
Which Alexander I still think is fine as like your long relief guy.
And he has options. Like that wasn't they claimed him off waiver. Like Davinsky was a major league contract for like $1.5 million. So it's not,
which is weird. Crazy, it's weird. He's been bad, but like his process, his stuff and like put together didn't make a lot of sense. And they even talked about extending him as a starter. And it also just didn't make any sense because he had a very bad fastball, no peripherals, and just all changeups, which is the worst possible secondary to have as your like leading pitch.
And again, like I think I'd rather like I think there's more interesting arms in AAA. Like I think
I'd rather way more.
Like the offensive side, I don't think like other than Caminero.
Yeah.
I'm not, waiting on Meade or Aranda or Shenton or like Cameron Meisner to come up and like.
I mean, I still say this. Like, I do think Aranda is like a major league bat, and I think he would absolutely help this team right now. And I do think he was Harold, and I think that was a big flaw going into the season. It clearly was a big issue. He had 40 singles out of 44 hits. That's a tremendous miss. But I think the team also didn't really, he was more like a glue guy. He's more like, and everybody got injured at the right time to keep him around for a little bit longer. So I'm not as down on that, but like Aranda was, I think he is actually an impact bat. The problem is you can't, like, it's hard to fit him in with the other players you have, but those players are failing. Like for the most part. I mean, like actually second base is the one place that we're actually getting some solid production. First base, Yandy is starting to come around, but like it's hard to like fit him in there. And you don't really want just like a lock in. But yeah, there's no like I think this bullpen this is the one that's like you can just trade stuff out, right? Like Kevin Kelly's been great. We talked about it like other team would have probably kept him, but like he was the odd man out because he had options. But like that, he's clearly been a much better pitcher since coming back. He's just like even better than last year. But like Manuel Rodriguez, the guy, he got a cup of coffee. Like he should be up here. Like he absolutely should be back up here.
Joe Record, I know. He's not on the 40 man right now, but I mean, if you got rid of Davinsky, like I think he's interesting. Edwin Acita.
Yeah.
I don't know if these guys are. I don't know if these guys are good, right? But like at least there's something new and interesting. Like I think we know what we have out of Davinsky.
And this is the problem, I think, with this bullpen, and why I always am saying that I never really worry about the Rays bullpen long term because they will cycle through arms. The fact this year that they haven't cycled through arms, they have kept pretty much a stagnant bullpen. It's failed so badly all the time, outside of basically Pete Fairbanks since he's like kind of come back. Like it's so, like there has been swings where like Maton had like a good like week and a half or so where he was quite good, but he's been mostly just awful. Clevenger was great. He was nails for a while. And the last like 4 appearances, I think he's given up like 3 runs these last 3 times. He's given up at least 3 runs, which I will say is a little bit of them just like kind of leaving him in because at that point it was already broken over. So you just kind of like let him kind of finish it out. Poche's back, who looks good. Like Jason Adam, I'm not too worried. Like he gave up some runs the other day, but like Fairbanks, Adam, Poche, Kelly, Armstrong have all been like the most solid. Like those are the most like reliable guys. Clevenger has been at the top. He's been like the elite number 1 guy, and now is like the most unreliable. So that's just, I don't know what's going on there, but it just does seem like the Rays moves with the pen have just been, it's been a lot of stagnation, which I think is a big problem with the way it was constructed, with so many vets and no options. And that, I think, ended up being the big issue. Is having Devenski in was a big problem because he doesn't have any options and he's bad. So like, that's not great, right? Like, Pete Fairbanks has options, but he's great. So you don't want to send him down. But like, Chris Devenski is a weak link, but he doesn't have any options. Phil Maton costs a lot of money and doesn't have any options. I don't think you can really go with both of those guys. Like, if you're the Rays, like, they really came into the season with a set pen, and injuries were the only way to get guys up. Manuel Rodriguez has proven, like, in his time here, that like they were kind of trusting him in some high leverage stuff. He came through with some big moments. He had a bit of a defensive blunder in Boston, but like, he's a young guy and pitchers are terrible fielders anyway. Usually, like, that happens. His stuff is really good. You see the stuff record. Like, there's some guys that you want to just, I feel like the Rays usually have like one or two spots they can like keep cycling through. And that's that, because there's just been nothing of that, no movement, that it really does feel like you just have these guys. This is the setup, the lineup, and you have to use them because you have them, and somebody has to take the inning. So Phil Maton is going to have to get big innings. Chris Devenski is going to have to get big innings. Like, Garrett Clevenger, whatever's working, whatever problems with him right now, he's going to have to get big innings. And so you are guaranteeing you're blowing up several games because you are just running out guys who you don't really fully trust right now, that you can't hide because somebody has to get innings.
Yeah. Manuel Rodriguez also, like, his biggest knock, or one of his bigger knocks as a prospect, was his command, and he's kind of fixed that in Durham. He's walking like 5.7%, which is like the best he's ever done in the pros. Man, yeah, like you said, usually there's one or two roster spots that the Rays could just turn through and try a couple different guys, and we just haven't seen that to this point. Harold Ramirez was DFA'd. I don't think we've talked since that decision was made. Harold Ramirez, though, man, like, we're going to talk about that decision, but like, Eric Neander said when they decided to DFA Harold Ramirez, like, we just need to play better, and we need to basically get better. I'm not quoting him, but basically need to get better players. And it's like, why don't we cut bait with Chris Devenski, man, and get someone better in? Again, like, it's a mostly inconsequential roster spot, but it doesn't have to be. Maybe you can push Maton to be, or we just need a guy to throw an inning or two in a blowout.
I think you need to have like another guy that you feel comfortable throwing in high leverage. And like, I think that comes up a couple of times where it doesn't necessarily, like, everything comes back to the offense, right? Like, the reason the Rays are losing right now is because of the offense, period. Like, I think there's not any, I'm not going to look at like Zach Eflin gave up 3 runs, so we're like dead. Like, he's got to not give up 3 runs. It's like, okay, well, that's silly. Like, Aaron Savali gives up 4 runs and he's like the biggest goat because you got to throw a shutout, man, for us to win this game with 1 run. That's like unrealistic, right? It's annoying for sure to not get like a nail start. Like, we got one with Taj Bradley, who was like incredible, who was on the hook for one of the most tough luck losses of the season until the Cubs bullpen just exploded on themselves. But the problem is, these games are close. The Rays aren't scoring. And then this is where that I think the run differential really is coming in, is that the games always end hugely lopsided. Yeah. Like, and it's happened a lot in June where, yeah, they may not win that game anyway, right? It might lose 2-1 or 3-1 or 4-2 or something like that. But then when it's like the 7th or 8th inning, and then like Phil Maton gives up like a grand slam, now it's 8-2. Well, now it's over. Now nobody's trying. Everybody's just like, all right, we lost. So you're not getting like that completely. You can say like, okay, then the Rays, the next 6 outs, they didn't score. but that's a completely different mindset, completely different pitch. Like nobody's going in there not to try, but you're like, I'm not going to win, so I'm going to go up there, maybe try to like get a big swing.
We've seen them rally in like late innings if it's like a tie game or a 1 or 2 run game. They've got multiple walk-offs this year. Like, I think again,
that's the only way they've won this last 10 game stretch is late inning heroics. Yeah.
If you keep it close and if Phil Maton doesn't give up the grand slam, like I feel like this team, again, I don't know how sustainable that is, right? But we've seen it happen a few times, and I think it's possible. Like, this team does have enough good hitters, Brandon Lau, Yandy Diaz, Randy Rosarena when he runs into one, to win games, to hit big home run. Jose Siri, I got to include his name. We're gonna, I think, talk a little bit more about him later, but. It feels like, man, if they just, even if they were down by a run going into the 8th, they could very well win those games. Years past, it's felt like even when the Rays have had a better offense, that they're down by a run, no shot, they are toast.
Yeah,
this year it does feel like they've got a little bit of fight in them when it's a close game,
and I think that's a big issue. Is like you are looking at this team and you're looking at these late inning games, and like that does hurt when you have Devenski and Maton, who you're just like are low leverage guys at this point. Yeah. And then you have Clevinger right now, who's like going through something, right? And like he's going to have to eventually pitch big innings again. But like you'd like to see him pitch those innings earlier or in a blowout, not in a tight game, right? If you can avoid it. And like maybe you would love to be able to be like, I don't know, Edwin Uceda, right? And he could blow it up too, but then like, I don't know, he may not. Like, I think it's like, Devenski has not been able to really be reliable all season. Phil Maton, outside of like about a 2-week stretch, has not been reliable all season. Clevinger right now, at this point, the last like week, 2 weeks, has not been reliable. It's hard to have 3 guys like that where you just, you have to use them at some point. It would be nice to be able to have shuttle in the pen where you can be like, you know what, Clevenger's been through stuff. Let's give him an extra day. Let's get him in there in the 6th, right, against like a lower part of the order, and then we can like maybe have in that higher leverage spot later on, because like Poche's been used the last 2 days and Adams been used the last 2 days. We're gonna have Manuel Rodriguez pitch the 8th instead, and then Fairbanks will come in, and like maybe it doesn't work, but it's giving you another option, and maybe it does. I honestly, that's the thing though, is you can't say like, okay, Manuel Rodriguez is going to be worse than Devenski and Maton, because like we have seen that time and time again that relievers, doesn't matter what their name is, like they're good or bad depending upon the year, depending upon the week, and like Manuel Rodriguez could be the best reliever we have right now, like for the rest of the season. Like stretches of like 2-3 months from even random people can happen. So you kind of need to keep cycling through and see when you catch that fire, right? Like it's the thing. It's like we've just had the same pen. There hasn't been like this guy got cut, let's bring him in. I mean, I guess the last one was Richard Lovelady, who's another guy who you're kind of like, he pitched interestingly, but he was redundant with the rest of the guys, and now he's hurt. But like that's it. Like you have too many redundancies where you have to fit them in. And that's just a big issue. And like the core problem is the offense, but there's all these other small things where it's like the starting pitching is giving up just a little bit too much, right? Like Ryan Pepio against the Braves again, it's just 1 run that the Rays scored in the 1st inning, and they could have scored more. And so they may not win that game when Pepio gives up the 1st home run, but like, you got to keep it to like not 3 home runs like in a row. Like you got to keep these things from like spiraling. And right now, like a lot of games the Rays are losing go from very close to very much not so quickly. And that's where you look at the lineup and you look at the team and you look at everything, and it's very confusing. And like in theory, you could see this team go on a run, but the way they're assembled right now and the way they're performing, it just seems like there needs to be some sort of spark and some sort of change, but I don't know what that is.
Well, no, I don't think like this is not the year. I mean, the Rays never push all their chips in, but I don't even think it's worth. I mean, if you could pull off like a Tommy Pham like trade, like not trade for Tommy Pham.
You could trade for Tommy Pham.
I don't want to trade for Tommy Pham.
He's available.
But you bring in a guy that's got multiple years of control left, that maybe that player needs a change of scenery, like I think Tommy Pham did while he was in St. Louis. And maybe it makes this team, better this year. So if you are going to hang around and still be within, striking distance of the wild card, it can help. So a player like that can help. And that's kind of like what Tommy Pham was in 2018. But also a player who you think, wow, this guy going into next year is going to be a core piece for us. This is not a prospect. This is not a guy that needs to cut his teeth anymore. He's a plug and play type option. And if there are any trades like that available, I think they kind of, they traded Hennessy Cabrera and Justin Williams for Tommy Pham. I mean, if any team is willing to take, I don't even know what the equivalent for that would be, but yeah, you pull the trigger on those types of trades. Other than that, man, I'm almost at the point where I'd rather see, some of these at bats that are going to these veteran players go to younger guys, or some of these innings, I should say. The offense, I kind of want to just leave be for a little bit. I
would love to leave it be, as in not have to watch it.
I mean, I don't think you trade, now is not the time to trade Randy Arozarena.
No.
Now is not the time. Well, maybe the time to trade Yandy Diaz. I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing. It depends upon what the offers are. Again, with Randy, it's like, is somebody trading for name, or are they trading for production? And that's always been the case with Randy. Are you trading for a 2.5 to 3 win outfielder with limited defense and very bad base running? Or are you trading for
really desperate
potential superstar? Are you trading for icon, Randy Arozarena, who's worth 6 WAR just by sheer cult of personality?
Yeah.
If you get that deal, you do that trade. I was thinking with this trade deadline coming up in about a month, I think that's right now at this point in the season. I don't see the stretch ahead. I don't see the Rays. I would be shocked to see the Rays rattle off 8-9 wins in a 10-game stretch. That doesn't seem physically possible, even though every team can go on a run like that. But the White Sox have actually kind of had a little bit of a run, where they've been playing really well lately. But it doesn't seem possible that this Rays team right now, with no change, out of nowhere, will just suddenly start not playing terrible baseball like they've been playing. However, I am very excited to get to the trade deadline season, because I don't think this is going to be a crazy busy trade deadline for the Rays, where they trade, Lau, Yandy, Randy, Paredes, Eflin, Savant, like a crazy big fire sale type of thing. But I do think it's going to be a nice, busy trade deadline where there's a lot of deals that are set up for winter, where you do see a wholesale change. But at the deadline, maybe something smaller. I tweeted this out today. I think a pitcher, like an Eflin, Savale, or a Littell, traded. A reliever, so a Armstrong or a Jason Adam, and and then you're Ahmed Rosario type, right? You trade those 3, you really you start hitting the phones for, what are you going to give for Randy? What are you going to give for Lau? What are you going to give for Paredes? What are you going to give for these guys, Siri, that type of thing? But I don't know if those trades get pulled off right now. Those seem like off-season trades.
Yeah, they do feel like more like off-season trades, and I think the Rays are clearly going to have to, again, we'll have more knowledge, hopefully, about the Wander Franco situation. I don't think I'm sure some people in the Rays are worried about how that is going to play out. I think they're probably operating under the assumption that they are going to be, not have to pay that contract. But we'll see. Maybe they've got better information than I do, but they're clearly going to have to cut payroll. Stu, they rolled out the biggest payroll in franchise history. Stu had some interesting comments, and I always try to take what he says when he's being interviewed with a grain of salt, because sometimes I think he just doesn't have the right people telling him what to say or what not to say. But it was made note of this is the biggest payroll. Let's hope it works out, and it's clearly not. So I think they're going to have to cut back, and it's going to be kind of interesting how they do that. And I think maybe the reason that you and I were, I think we were both, if they had traded Randy Arozarena this offseason, we would have just been all right, what's the return? But again, we were still bullish that this team, as constructed, could win. And now I'm not convinced they can, but maybe everyone around Major League Baseball is looking at this roster going, we don't really want any of these guys who are going to be on the wrong side of 30 soon. We don't think that value is still there. And so what does that look like if you're trading? That's where you get into a really bad spot where you've shown your hands. You kept Yandy and Randy and Brandon Lau and all your pitchers. And then now you go into the offseason, they all have no value. And if you wanted to rebuild it, how are you going to rebuild it? The Rays farm system, while still incredibly talented, and I think you can rely on guys like Junior Caminero, Carson Williams, and Xavier Isaac to be that next generation, and they're going to kind of come up staggered. Carson Williams and Caminero probably come up full time for around the same time, and Isaac a couple of years behind. But anyways, this farm system isn't as deep as it was, 4 years ago, because all those guys are on the team right now. I mean, Brandon Lau, it's been a little bit longer than that.
Or stuck in the minors right now because
we're still stuck in the minors.
Curtis Mead and Jonathan Aranda.
Curtis Mead and Aranda. So if they go into the offseason, it might be they do sound more like offseason trades, but strike while the iron's hot. And if Yandy Diaz is heating up, and this season's still not going anywhere, it would have to be one of the bigger names out there if he was on the market.
What you look at, so with Randy Arozarena, we know that there was I don't know how much smoke there was of a potential trade. I think there was a lot of the Rays trying to trade Harold and Manuel Margot, and teams being but what about Randy? And they were that costs a lot more. And their teams were no, thank you. I'll maybe we'll circle back to Manuel Margot. I think there was conversation, right? The Rays talk about everybody, and that's important because I think they know what the value is for Randy. I think they're going to know what the value is at this deadline, and they're going to have to make a decision. I think you're right. They're going to have to make a decision with some of these players. Is the deadline deal the best you can do? And is this a player you're willing to comfortably go into next season with? And I think for some of these guys, I think Yandy and Lau I think those are firm. I think those are yeses that they could roll into next season with. I think Eflin at his price is really hard when you have pitchers returning. Savali is so much easier, and Littell is so much easier because they're so much cheaper. And if you're well, these are all 3, 4, 5 type of guys, you just take the cheaper ones, right? If you don't see a huge difference between Aaron Savali and Zach Eflin production, you take the guy that's worth 12 million less. But when it comes to somebody like Randy, you do have to look at this. We've talked about this for a while. His play style is such that it will age so bad, so bad. And we don't want to get to that point because it could be off a cliff because he's so much speed and kind of vibes based that you really could see this as a player that really sinks. But you also don't want to it's tough. You don't want to do necessarily. They're also in a tricky political setup, which I don't know how much this factors in, but I don't think it's a 0% amount, is trying to secure funding on a new stadium. And does that hurt anything? Does it turn fan support when you trade your name stars, even though they all are playing terribly and the team is terrible? So it's so much easier to trade players when they're bad right now than it is if they were playing great. But it's also very easy to trade players that are playing great who you don't think can sustain it because you get a lot more back. So it's you don't want to trade low low value, not low or low. But you also don't want to necessarily like tank like the feeling for like casual fans. And I don't think that's like a huge factor. Like I think Stu he is not Artie Moreno. He's not Steve Cohen. He is not an owner that I think would basically be like, you cannot trade this player while this deal is going down. But I do think that is a consideration in some point. Like it's not the only thing, but I think that is a real big factor. And if it's like a pretty equal thing, like we could trade Randy right now, but this is about the same offer we got last offseason. I think we can get maybe like, we'll like drop one of the prospects from this deal in the offseason, but like it's pretty much the same core of this deal. Let's just wait to the offseason. Like, I do think that's a real possibility, and we'll see. But it does suck that right now we're talking about the trade deadline, and kind of in a way, I see this as like, I'm kind of getting ready to just sort of see like what you're saying with making those trades where the Rays, I could see trading key named pieces, former All-Stars, but for pieces that would play this year in the second half. And you could have a kind of David Price style trade where the second half you get players back, players for the future, like, but also players back like Drew Smyly, who like pitches as well, and you have like a nice little run. Or the Chris Archer trade, where you trade your ace, and then you get back a couple of pieces who are playing right away in Glasnow and Meadows, and then you have Boz, who's coming back later, who is looking very sharp, who might be called up quite soon.
Yeah. They can decide to punt, and I think some of it will be results based. They'll stick to their process, right? They'll listen to offers on almost anyone, and the trade deadline could still go a million different ways for the Rays. I do think they are going to have to look for ways to shed salary either now or in the winter. Zach Eflin seems like the obvious one, scheduled to make $18 million next year. Brandon Lau starts to get a little bit more expensive, has club options for the next 2 years that would earn him, I think, like $22 million. Jeffrey Springs might even be someone, if Springs or Rasmussen come back and show that they are fine and healthy and good, I think both of, one or both of those names could be floated out there in trade talks just to shave a few $1 million off your salary. I don't think Shane McClanahan's going anywhere yet. Obviously, Wander Franco is scheduled to make $8.5 million, which is pretty sizable next year, and it goes up every year after that. So I think there are ways with guys that still have some sort of value to shave like $10-15 million off this payroll, and make some decent trades that bring back some players like Aaron Savali. Like I don't see a way he's back next year. Things could change, but he's making almost $5 million this year and going into his final year of arbitration. So it'll be up to them, right? They could keep running this team out, continue to play at or around 500 baseball, and let 2024 die as quickly as it was born. And that might not be the worst decision, right? Just to let it play out. We'll see what happens. But there will be some moves. Harold Ramirez, DFA.
There's no.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
There's no way Ahmed Rosario finishes the season with the Rays.
Oh, no.
That's like too easy of a trade. That's too easy of a trade because they also do it because he's a vet and you'd want him on a winning club.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. Harold Ramirez, though, was DFA'd and eventually released. No team traded. No team made a claim, which wasn't too shocking. I thought the Rays could have convinced a team that was interested in him to give him something, but maybe other teams aren't answering those calls anymore. They said, we'll wait to take him on a prorated league minimum and let you eat the other $2 million that he's owed. Still hasn't signed anywhere though. Have you seen his?
He did. Washington Nationals. He's in AAA Harrisburg.
Oh, Harold.
The Nats, who are this fascinating, great rebuild. We're actually going to be the Rays are facing the Nats soon. The Nats, who actually have a better record than the Rays, or the same record as the Rays, but are like a half game out of the postseason spot because the National League is all under 500. The Nats are interesting because they've basically done this rebuild. They kind of did a tear down rebuild, but now they're kind of, this year they went in and they signed like a bunch of really kind of fun like vets, like Eddie Rosario and Jesse Winker and Joey Gallo and like a bunch of like these Nick Senzel, who kind of pulled a Papelbon and fought Mackenzie Gore in the dugout. Which, did you see Jonathan Papelbon's tweet about that? How it's like you got to take that into the
he's become an enjoyable Twitter
hallway.
follow. I think a few years out of baseball has been good for Jonathan Papelbon.
Yes, yeah. He's able to joke about some of his buffoonery. It's pretty good. But yeah, he's like, you got to take that down the hallway. You got to take that out into the hallway. I know from personal experience. The Nats are interesting because they like built this team that's like still very young. Like CJ Abrams is amazing. But it's mostly like a bunch of vets, and some of which are doing really well. And it's like really setting them up to nicely like potentially flip some of these pieces in the at the deadline. Harold is another one of those guys. He's not going to be flipped because nobody really, I can't imagine he has much trade. He doesn't have trade value. We just saw he didn't have trade value. But like it's a kind of a fun, like it raises the floor. It's kind of a fun way to rebuild because you're kind of like keeping it competitive, but you're not necessarily spending a ton of money, but you're like kind of, you have like a pretty enjoyable product, right? So, I mean, let's be honest, that's probably going to be favored against the Rays for at least 2 out of 3. Like just the floor, like the way things are going. But like they're an interesting team. So like hopefully Harold gets a chance to come up. He might be a guy that comes up after the deadline once they trade like a Gallo or a Winker and kind of like, or Meneses or something like that. Yeah, it's an interesting setup. Like Harold, it's tough, right? First of all, after Harold got DFA'd, the Rays were like a couple of late inning comebacks away from losing like 9 in a row. So like Harold missing piece, that was it. Like the bottom was going to fall off once Harold Ramirez left. But like, you know, Harold's a guy. I think that one of the big issues is like once Harold left, that was sort of like the piece that we always talked about trading him, and not because Harold isn't a great person and seemingly one of like the best teammates in the league, some like a guy who's just always has a smile on his face, who you really are rooting for to do well, and has a very unique and interesting like style to himself. He was just the guy that was like holding the team back from making like different maneuvers with the lineup. And while the lineup has performed very poorly, like even worse since he left, the lineups have looked good, like on paper, because you now are able to like rotate some guys in. You're able to use, and this was before, I guess, like a flu or some sort of virus like infected the entire clubhouse. And like Caballero is possibly on death's door on like an iron lung. It sounds like Topkin tweeted like he's like numb in his extremities and like coughing and has no vision in one eye. It's like, what the hell? Like get him to some sort of medical professional. Like what's happening over there? But like you have guys like Caballero and Walls and Rosario that you can like rotate through and like play in different positions and get people DH time, which is what we were kind of asking for, which is get Josh Lowe off his feet and get Brandon Lau off his feet and get Biondi and Paredes, and you know, you kind of mix it up. So it gives the Rays more versatility. It does come at the loss of a lot more smile percentage, but hope Harold can play well in the nation's capital.
Like the way the roster would have been constructed, Harold's role would have been so small. Like we already saw that he was not playing. No. It was just not doing anybody any good to have him on the team. And you were paying him a lot of money, over $3 million. It's relative, right? For the Rays.
I mean, but like enough. Like that's like sizable amount. Yeah, that's like
but it's a sunk cost at this point. Like
yeah.
you owe it, unless somebody was going to claim him, and you ran that risk. And I think the Rays probably knew that, and it's just you'll eat that money, and it's not our money, it's Stu's money, so I don't really care. And there's other investors, but
I really care about the 0.2 percentile investor and his bottom line.
Yeah,
I don't care about Stu, it's that person.
He's already suing Stu, so
yeah.
I think that got settled. Those
I think that's settled. Yeah, I don't think he got any money.
I don't want to. Let's not talk about legal or political stuff anymore, because that's the thing that, like, we think we feel terrible now. Just wait till the news that the deal is dead in like a month.
We got past the first. It passed the first big hurdle. It passed the first big hurdle. I mean, I'm not going to say anything's done until it's done, but it's looking very good.
Yeah, and I feel like the Tampa Bay Times wanted to make it seem like it was more up in the air than it is. Again,
except they did have the article with John Romano, who basically had a pretty interesting setup about how he thinks this is a done deal. But I think his reasoning was actually pretty good in Romano, saying he has seen a lot of these deals. He has seen a lot of these setups, and he's seen a lot of them fail. He's seen them all fail.
Well,
and the
markers City.
Of that. Oh, yeah.
Kansas City thought they had a deal until they didn't.
There's markers, and this is what Romano said, is there's markers of this is not going to be a yes. We're not going to say no yet, but we're never getting to a yes.
Yeah.
That's not really the case in this situation. A lot of the questions, and it's seemingly a very jovial process. Even in the no's, even the councilmen who are are a firm no, seemingly are not in in a spiteful or vitriolic way. So it does feel like a bit more of the people that are on the fence, the people that are yes are yes, the people that are no are no, and the people that are on the fence have some general questions and things and concerns, but not major ones. And I think it's seemingly close that if the Rays and Major League Baseball want this to happen, I don't see the St. Petersburg Council being the ones that rear end it and completely take it off the table. Yeah. I think there could be some potential last little moves and concessions that can happen, and that's fine. And if you can get a better deal for the city, that's even better. But I think overall, all of this stuff we've talked about, right? All that I've ranted about and bad and negative in our rain clouds of just miserable baseball watching experiences mostly. And we'll end on a couple positives, but it's so much worse if you don't have a baseball team. The negative of the void that is there, the opposite of love is indifference, right? And so having nothing, not even hate, is worse than having not something to cause you mental perish means that you care about something. So if it's gone, that's even worse than having a bad baseball team. So hopefully this deal can get done. Hopefully there's no surprises there. Hopefully there's no secret bad things that are snuck in there that make this a much better deal and really bad for the city. Hopefully if there are issues for the city that they can come to them, and they're pretty much, it feels like we're as close as this has ever been to actually completion. So I hope they get it across the line.
And I think they will. That's just my personal opinion on it. I want to talk a little bit about Jose Siri before we end the show. Siri seems to have righted the ship at the plate for his 2024 season. Looks like a different approach. It looks like a much better swing, more controlled swing. And he is launching the baseball, making really hard contact, and it's leading to better results. And I think the results that we were expecting out of Jose Siri. I think last year was, I won't say the career high because he's still really young. He could figure it out more if given the opportunity to play every day. But this is kind of the numbers I was expecting. High strikeout, that's fine, but he's going to have power. And and play really great defensive center field. So, man, like that's been his resurgence has been a bright spot, right? And having him, like having a thumper at the bottom of your lineup is so huge. We saw, I mean, that's what Jose Siri was last year. You know, a few years before that, it was Mike Zunino, who was just having an incredible all-star level season. To have a guy like hitting 8th or 9th that is going to hit 20 plus home runs, that's nice because it turns nothing into something, right? You know that inning where you've got 1 on and 2 out, and all of a sudden a 2-run homer in the game has changed now, and with a guy that we weren't expecting to produce. It's huge.
Mike Zunino is my comparison, which is the funniest possible. Like, if you're looking at like a comparison in terms of like players, style, personality, flair, not exactly the two that you'd put together. But that's why you come to this show, because we don't do something lazy and find another fast, like flashy center fielder. No, we say Papa Mike, the large defensive catcher, Florida man versus Jose Siri, who is in excess of charisma. He has charisma, and then like he's got a charisma. It's like the milkshake where you get another tin that it came in with the extra milkshake. That's how much charisma he has. He has like another little extra bit. It's all overloading. But it's very similar, right? It's like the defense is so good that offensively you can basically be terrible. You can be a black hole, and you're still like, this is still pretty great. This is still like a good player. But then you add in the fact that, like you said, like a little bit of pop, a little bit of power, like out of nowhere with nothing going, that player who is your 9th batter can suddenly add some offense. That's huge. So Siri did a swing change at some point during the season. I think it was about a month ago, is when he started talking about it, at least with Trisha. The last I could find was around like mid-May, was when he first sort of mentioned kind of going to a two-handed follow-through. So a little bit more controlled, a little less. He doesn't always do a two-handed follow-through. He does kind of have he had a single-handed finish on the game-winning home run against Atlanta, but mostly a little bit more controlled in that swing. So in the last month, so 5/16, so May 16th to now, Jose Siri has a triple slash of 247 batting average, 329 on base percentage, a 534 slug, and a 148 weighted runs created plus, WRC plus, a 372 WOBA as well, weighted on base average. Like great numbers. Like that is like phenomenal. So again, with WRC plus, 100 is average. So he's 48 points better than average. And that's very impressive. He has 5 home runs. He has 6 doubles that's in 83 plate appearances. Still strikes out a lot. That's okay. He's been walking at a pretty decent clip, about 8%. You want that a little bit higher. All the peripherals look good, and he's a streaky player, obviously, but like that's okay. And if you can put up that, and even if you go a little bit further back, from basically May on, he's at a 120 WRC plus, 474 slugging, and 331 on base average. Like you'll take that 10 out of 10 times from your defensive center fielder. And we've already seen him have some unbelievable highlights. He's had a couple of weird errors in center field this year, which also happens when you get to a lot of balls. You've also seen some weird, like kind of not focused.
You know who has no errors in the last 2 years is Nick Castellanos. He has 0 errors.
No errors. Yeah. And I mean, we also have no errors in the last couple of years. We're not getting any balls. No putouts, no.
That's right.
Yeah, you want to see guys like Kiermaier had errors. Derek Jeter had errors, but he kept it low because he didn't get to as many balls. So that was kind of threw stuff off. You kind of want to see great defensive players have errors too, because that means that you just want to get him everything. Get to everything, make a crazy play. Maybe it's not gonna, you're not gonna come down with it. But then sometimes you come down with a game sealing or game saving at least catch at the wall where he posterizes Randy Arozarena, like taking the contact, Antoine Winfield Jr. style, going across the middle, or I guess more like Mike Evans going across the middle because he got the contact. Yeah, I mean, like Jose Siri is definitely a bright spot on this team after he really struggled to start the season. Like everybody, I mean, honestly, like he has definitely put in some good work early on. One of the things we talked about with him when we were kind of criticizing his performance was that he was suddenly not Jose Siri. He was not hitting for power. He was trying to like hit the ball the other way, and he was still striking out a ton because he has really bad like plate discipline and vision. So like he will swing outside of the zone like more than almost anybody. That's just part of his game. But he was trying to go for more of like a contact approach, which is
don't do that.
I don't care. I don't care about that. I don't want him to hit more singles. Like if you can hit like 20, 30 home runs and then hit and get on base more, cool. But if you're not hitting the power and you're just trying to get on base more, you're going to be just a worse player. So now that Siri has kind of gotten a little bit more control, a little more quieter in his set, in his loadout and his delivery and his like kind of follow through, all that looks just visually a lot more in control. He's going to have some bad strikeouts. That's going to happen, but he's going to get that A swing off, and he has so much power. Like right now in June, the two players with the most amount of home runs for the Rays are Jose Siri with 3 and Brandon Lau with 3. And those two guys have won games pretty much on their bats. Brandon Lau had the walk-off home run against Chicago. Jose Siri had the go-ahead 2-run shot against Atlanta, which ended up holding up to win. You need those guys that have that like effortless power. And we talked about that as one of the biggest problems with this offense was just a lack of pop, no power. Having Siri back with power, not just trying to do whatever he was trying to do early in the season, kind of getting back to what makes him special, which is dazzling plays in the outfield, crazy big home run power at the plate, and turning something out of nothing. That's the Jose Siri that's a starting center fielder that you want on your team, not the guy that was trying to change himself into something he wasn't. Jose Siri is perfect the way he is.
Mm-hmm.
He is a flashy, power hitting center fielder. He's going to strike out about 35% of the time. He's going to strike out on pitches that the pitcher didn't even think he was going to get a K on. But he's also going to save you a run in the outfield.
Well, and the Rays are so good at, I feel like we've talked about this so much over the last years, is they're so good at saying, don't worry about your flaws as a player and really lean into your strengths.
Yes.
And that's what we're seeing Siri get back to. Yandy Diaz, don't worry about being a power hitter.
No.
Like, you don't need to be one of the best hitters in baseball. Like, you talk about Mike Zeno. Don't cut back on your strikeouts. Keep swinging as hard as you can and hit balls 450 feet. So I'd like to see more of that. But really excited for what we got out of Siri so far in the last month or so. And I hope that continues. I hope, guys like Taylor Walls, who we saw come up, make a huge double play, diving play. And that's what Taylor Walls does. Now the bat, it's been like a handful of games. So the bat, I mean, if you're worried about Taylor Walls' bat, it's not because of these last few games. It's because you don't think he can hit. But I've liked having him back, and I feel like the roster is in a better spot. I still don't know if it's good enough. And it feels like it isn't this year. But again, there are still, like we said at the top of the show, some interesting things to be positive about and some reasons to tune into this team night after night. And I'll do that no matter what. But
you still have to tune in for every Taj Bradley start. Like that's appointment television. Like he is an electric young pitcher. And Ryan Pepio too. Like these guys are going to have, they're young. They're going to have some blowups. We saw it with Snell and Archer and Price and Glass now. Like the greats are gonna have some games where you're like, yikes, this guy's got nothing today.
Right.
But then they're gonna have some games where nobody can touch them. And we've seen that already with both Bradley and Pepio. So those two guys, I still want to watch pitch every time out. And you're going to have some stinkers. That's going to happen, but that's part of the learning process. And I just want to see a lot more of those guys. So
yeah,
those are appointment television.
That is going to do it for this week's episode of Raise Your Voice. We are now over an hour. It's past 11 o'clock on the East Coast. So if you're still watching, thank you guys. But that is going to do it. If you like what we do, leave a rating, leave a review, wherever you get your podcast. Go ahead and like this video on YouTube. If you didn't even know we're on YouTube, just head on over to youtube.com/@raiseyourvoice. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you know every time we go live, you can join us in the comments. And if you really want to say thank you, you can head on over to patreon.com/raiseyourvoice, where you can become a member for as little as $1 a month. As always, make sure to head on over to draysbay.com to check out all that great Rays coverage, including Darby's most recent article about this terrible Rays offense. Once again, thank you guys for listening, and we will talk to you next week.